Hello, I'm Meri Fatin. Welcome to Cover, where we discuss great new West Australian books. The show is presented by Writing WA, the peak body for writing and associated activities in Western Australia. The book we're discussing today is Small Things, illustrated by Mel Tregonning, who died in 2014 before she'd fully completed the book. Small Things was published by Allen Unwin in August 2016 due to the perseverance of Mel's sister, Violet Tregonning, who's with me today. Welcome, Violet.
Thank you very much.
And for further insight, we're also joined by illustrator James Foley. Thanks for being here, James.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Violet, how would you describe Small Things, the storyline and the book itself?
Okay, so Small Things is a story about a little boy who is going through a tough time in his life, and basically it's just what a lot of children go through. It's a struggle of not fitting in and not doing very well at school, and universal feelings basically that we all just go through from time to time. So it's really just focusing on a particular part in his life and how overwhelming it becomes for him, and how he basically can get through and how he can cope with this tough time.
Now, Mel started working on this book pre-2010. Can you remember exactly when?
Yeah, it was about 2008 when she first started some preliminary drawings, which back then was for a small little story called Night, and that was only about 4 pages, and that started as a little girl, and that's where she first discovered these monsters basically that were in the shadows, and how she could just create this overwhelming emotion and feeling and just display how these feelings that we all go through, and just in a really beautiful way, just the darkness and the loneliness and the hopelessness that we all feel from time to time.
So when she first started it, she was working a full-time job, and then she gave up that job to focus solely on the book.
Yeah.
But you were saying that her methodology was something that made it slow. Why was her methodology slow?
Yeah, so she had this technique where she would use this soft graphite pencil, and she would use this kind of medium weight of paper. And from my understanding, I mean, James might know a little bit more about this than me, it's just, it takes a long time to draw that way, and she would just spend weeks on one drawing. And when you see how many drawings there are in this book, I mean, it's all drawings, there's no words. So it took her such a long time, and that's why she felt that she needed to leave her job. She didn't leave it straight away. She had a few periods where her employer was able to give her 3 months off at a time, so she was really fortunate. But she just got to the point where it was just taking her too long, and she just wanted to focus solely on the book.
James, as a fellow illustrator, what are your observations of Mel's artistry in Small Things?
It's really, really incredible. It's very mature art, and I'd love to be able to draw like that, but that's way beyond me. I know very few people who can draw this well and this accurately in a picture book, and the techniques are incredible as well.
So what would be difficult and slowing about the way that Mel was drawing?
I think it's a lot to do with how consistent her characters are to start with. Everything's incredibly accurate and detailed, which is really, really hard to do consistently throughout a book. It's hard enough in a picture book that has just usually about 32 illustrations, but this being a wordless graphic novel, there's multiple drawings of the one character on the one page. So it means quite a lot of drawings of the character that you have to keep accurate, and from different angles as well. She also makes use of a lot of lighting effects, which are incredibly tricky to do by hand. In a computer using digital artwork, that would be relatively easy, but a page like this, where you have these lighting effects of the child night light, and this light by the bed here, all this light being cast across, and all this shadowy stuff through here, that's incredibly hard to do with just a graphite pencil. It requires a lot of care and a lot of skill. And even things here, like the way that these shadowy monsters are transparent 3D objects, that would be quite easy to do digitally, but by hand, again, is very, very hard. And I'm just so astonished and so in love with the artwork, really.
Violet, you were saying that Mel actually used the family as a resource to develop the characters.
Yeah, I mean that's one explanation I can give to the characters and how well they flow and they look the same, is because she took so many photos of all of us in the family doing various poses. We'd have to pose for hours, in bed, lying in a certain way, or holding our hand up, or walking, because there are so many shots of the children walking. It got really tiresome at times, but she would just say, it's necessary. It's really necessary, and I'd be like, no, it's not. Just draw. You're good. But it was really important to her to make sure she got things right, and she studied so much of all different, lighting and how things would look naturally, even though it's a comic, even though it's not real, but it looks real.
And you were saying to me that although in the published book the images are truly beautiful, that the actual original images are absolutely breathtaking.
Yeah. Like what James was saying, I think a lot of people think that a lot of it is Photoshop because of how perfect it looks, but it's all original pencil drawing. And when you see those originals and you see, the little pencil strokes and the lines, and you get really up close to the artwork, it's just phenomenal. And it just blew us all away when we put it all up together for the exhibition that we did for the book launch. And all the family got to see the originals because they'd always been hidden away, I guess, from most of the extended family. It was just wonderful to see it all. And
they're all quite big, aren't they? Even though some of them published are quite tiny.
Yeah.
The originals are all big.
Yeah.
So that's got to be part of the length of time that it took, I guess.
Yeah, that's definitely another reason for the time. They were just, the spreads that James just showed was about this big. So, and that's, one of my favourite pieces. It's just beautiful.
And I know you were saying that Mel is very particular about the way you handled the work, about what was the protocol.
Yeah, well, it was my whole life, everything that she ever did. Before she would show me any piece of art, she would make me put my hands out, and she would inspect my hands, and she'd put a finger across to see if they were a bit sweaty, and she'd tell me to go wash them, and if I was eating something or if I had a coffee, she'd make me put it away. And even if I was just going to a computer to look at something she'd done on Photoshop, I couldn't bring anything in the vicinity. It was hilarious. But now, it was funny when I was getting all of the artwork together to send to the publishers, because I actually had a coffee near me, and I knew that she'd just be cursing me, but I was
she'd
just
disapprove.
I was just like, no, Mel, you're making me do this. My coffee's going to be there. I need coffee.
I want to ask you about getting the book published now, because it was just a matter of weeks after Mel died that you started the process.
Yeah.
How did you know what to do?
I didn't. I had no clue. I just knew that it felt like the most important thing I was going to do with my life was to get this done. And I just from the moment that she passed away, I had to. And it took a few weeks, to get myself together enough to be able to call them. But
and you had to trawl through emails and stuff to find contacts. And
and she wasn't a very organised person. She had papers everywhere in her studio, and I had to rummage through things and find the contract and find the person that I should be contacting. And so that was a bit exhausting, let alone calling them. And I was quite stressed about calling them because I didn't know what they'd say, and it was just so important to me to make sure it would be published. But they were wonderful. When I called them, it was they just said, we will do everything we can to make sure that it does get published. And that just meant the world to me. I knew it was going to be a hard road ahead and there'd be a lot of work, but just to know that we were all on the same team was really important.
Yeah. And you needed to enlist help to finish the book. As I said in the introduction, it was incomplete. And that came in the form of Shaun Tan, who was an admirer of Mel's work.
Yeah.
What did he have to do to complete the book?
Yeah, so it may seem like he, didn't do a great deal, I guess, because there was only a few images that were needed to finish the book. But he actually had to completely study her whole style and understand how to draw the way she drew, because James would know, all artists, they have their different way of drawing, and it can be completely different. Some takes a lot of time, it's quite quickly. But he had to completely study her way of drawing. He would meet with the publishers and give them creative direction, and he was really he played a huge part in making sure that it would get published in the end.
So James, what would it be like as another illustrator to take on Mel's work?
It would be a huge responsibility and an honour as well. But yeah, exactly what Violet said. It's a real challenge to draw in someone else's style. I've never really had to do that before myself, only just with friends, just when mucking around and trying to draw in each other's styles just for the heck of it. But yeah, trying to actually take on someone else's work and try and get it to the calibre that they intended would be a huge challenge. But something that Shaun would be totally able to meet. He's kind of God to us Western Australian illustrators.
Yeah.
But I do know from his style, he's used graphite quite a bit, but his style tends to be a little bit more loose. He has lots of little tiny textures in his pencil sketches, whereas Mel's is very smooth. It's so smooth that when it's printed in the book, you can't see the pencil sketches very much at all. So he would have to study it quite a bit and figure out how he would not just be able to make the characters consistent with Mel's style, but that style as well.
It's almost like changing your brain.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Rather than just being able to do what comes naturally, you'd have to really focus and be aware of every tiny little pencil stroke that you're doing.
Did Shaun Tan give you any kind of hints or ideas about what he was experiencing in terms of having to copy Mel's work?
I didn't get to speak to him a great deal. I spoke to him through the publishers mainly, but I know that he was very invested in this project. And even from the start, he's the one who approached Mel about her work when they were first both published together in a little graphic novel called Flinch. And he saw her work in there, the earlier Night that I was speaking about back in 2009, and said that he thought her work was great and that she should pursue it further. And that's when she said that she was, and that she was working on it, and sent him some of the sketches, the earlier sketches of Small Things, and he was the one who then put her forward to his publishers, and that's how she got her publishing contract. So they did email back and forth back then for a little while about how she was going, and she sent him some of the more final drawings, and he was blown away by her technique and thought she was just incredible. So when he found out that Mel had passed away, it was a huge shock for him. And he took it, even though he'd never met her or even spoken to her, it was all through email. He took it hard, and he wanted to be involved, and it just meant the world to our family to have him involved. Let alone any artist that would be willing to put their time and effort into finishing someone else's project. To have Shaun Tan, and he was just her idol. Like she just thought he was incredible.
And I mean, to have it, we were talking earlier about how getting a contract was a big deal. It was exciting, and we were kind of laughing about it in the sense that obviously Mel's talent had a huge amount to do with it. But did she sort of feel that there was some doubt at some point that she would get a contract, that she would ever really kind of make it?
I think that Mel was actually, she was quite arrogant, to be honest. Like, I think she always knew that...
she knew she was good.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
She was quietly arrogant, just in her whole persona and the way she was about her art. She knew she was good at what she did, and she loved doing it. It was her passion, and she always knew. And I remember when she told us, it was just like, I've got a contract, I'm going to be published. And it was like, okay, like, this is great. And she was just like, it was going to happen.
But how easily does it happen, James? I mean, how much of a challenge does it represent, even for good artists, to get a contract and become published?
It's very hard to get your foot in the door. There's only so many children's publishers in Australia, and being in Western Australia as well, we're very isolated from most of that industry, which is mostly on the East Coast. We only have 2 publishers in, maybe 3 in WA who do children's books, and only 1 or 2 of those are open to people of non-Indigenous background. We've got Magabala books in Broome as well, which is for people with Indigenous background. So having just those 2 or 3, it makes it very tricky to get through. When you submit work to a publisher, it goes onto what's called a slush pile, which is full of submissions from all sorts of people of all sorts of skill levels. And some of them are not publishable at all, and some of them are really, really worth publishing. And it's just a matter of publishers being able to get through that pile and find the little diamonds in there amongst the rubble, I suppose. And I mean, there's that challenge, and there's also the additional challenge, I guess, of just the isolation of being a writer or an illustrator, and how, you know, having a tribe around you can really make a difference. You're part of an organisation called Squibby. Yes. The Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. Yes. So what kind of support does that represent? So it's an international organisation. It started in San Francisco, and there's chapters all around the world, 20,000 members. And in Western Australia, we have about 130 members and about 50 core members who've been part of that since probably about 2007, 2008. And that's a fantastic community of people who all understand what it's like to not only try and get published, but to then get through the creative process of actually being edited and getting final work together to make a book happen. And so without that support, it would have been a lot more challenging, I think, for myself to get my foot in the door. I owe my first contracts to contacts I made through SCBWI, or as we call it, Squibby. Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting that you were saying that, for example, even where, you know, Mel and Shaun Tan were in contact, they hadn't met. Was Mel mates with other illustrators, or was she very much working in isolation?
She was quite a reserved person who did often, you know, keep to herself, and she had groups of you know, friends and different people that were all doing the same sort of things. But I don't think that a lot of them were at her level or at that place where they were ready to, you know, be looking for contracts. So I don't think she had a great deal of support from, you know, other fellow authors and creators at her level, which could have basically helped things, I guess. But I guess she was lucky to have Shaun Tan, so absolutely the best contact to have.
I want to go back to talking about, I guess, the storyline of Small Things, to ask you, do you believe that it's autobiographical?
No, I don't, because she was someone that was very full of life and full of love for what she did, and she never talked about it that way to me, and she talked about it so often, about what she was trying to get at, and
which was what?
Being a universal story, and just showing those feelings of that, you know, the loneliness, and when you're not feeling very confident about what you were normally very good at, and just generally, she wanted to connect with all people. And it wasn't about her, it was never, I think that might have been one of the reasons why she changed it from being a girl, from Night, because she didn't necessarily want those parallels. You know, but we often get asked about, you know, do we see ourselves in the book? You know, do I see myself as the sister or anything like that? And I honestly don't. I just think that she was a true artist in the sense of just wanting to portray this unique story, and she was in her element when she was creating it, and she was just loving what she was doing. It was really just the problem that she became too isolated, I think, in focusing on the book towards the end, and that's where things went wrong.
And you have, in promoting the book, strongly attached a mental health awareness message to it. Why did you decide to do that?
Because I think it's a really important thing that I can do now, and that's not what Mel was getting at with Small Things, and I try to make sure that is clear, but I just think it is really important to attach it to the book in my way, not through what Mel was doing, but by showing that it can be used in that way. It can be used to help support people. It can be used to teach young people about mental illness, or just about those feelings of self-doubt and the loneliness which can lead to a mental illness, and just detecting it early and getting help early. It's a great tool to be able to have conversations, really important conversations with people without needing to actually say much at all, which is why I think it's so good with children, because you can just look at it with them and show them things and see what they say and what they pick up on, and then you can ask questions, oh, have you felt this way? Did you experience this at school? How are you feeling about your grades? Or did you get left out in netball? It's just a really great tool to use in that way, which I think is so important.
And in an extraordinary twist of fate, it happens that you have a background in psychology, James. And I'm quite interested to know what you think of Small Things as a resource in that space.
I think it could be really, really useful. It's a book that reminds me a lot of The Red Tree by Shaun Tan as well, which also uses symbolic illustrations, which can be interpreted in a multiple of different ways. People can look at the illustrations in Small Things and these small little shadowy monsters chewing away at the boy, and interpret them as anxiety or as depression or as low self-esteem or negative self-talk or more serious pointy end mental illness. It's really up to people to be able to interpret it the way that they want, and that's the beauty of this book. Being a wordless book as well, I think really helps with that. So people can maybe see themselves as this character and see that he gets to kind of rock bottom, but he has the support of people around him, and people who love him, and he starts to recognise, spoiler alert, I suppose, but starts to recognise that he's not alone, not just because other people support him, but other people feel the same way that he does as well. And that's really, really important, I think. I remember from my work in mental health that the single biggest factor in people being able to support their own mental health is social support. It's the main one by far. So that's what this book is about, I think.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up the importance of how wordless books are open to our own interpretation, and therefore essentially can increase their usefulness in that way. But what are the additional considerations then of making a book that is wordless, that you want to make sure that you're conveying the thing you meant to convey? Yeah,
I think maybe that's why it needs to be so detailed. Every single background needs to be very clear about what the setting is. You can't have a little caption that says one day at school. You need all those details there so that the reader can recognise exactly what the setting is. Facial expressions and body language have to be completely accurate as well, so that people can say, I know exactly how that character is feeling, or exactly what they're trying to say in this little frozen moment where they're gesturing to this other character. But apart from those things, it's also the sequence of images has to be very clear, because when we're reading a comic or a graphic novel, it's about what happens in that invisible space between panels. It's about joining all of that together to make it a little movie in your head, and without any words at all. The reader has to be so clear, not confused at all about exactly what's happening, because Mel really wanted to get across a particular thing here, so she really wanted to make sure that a particular message got across, and it's very tricky to get that across without any words.
Yeah. Violet, I love the fact with this book that, I guess because there are so many illustrations and they are each so emotive, that the more you look at the book, the more you can take out of it.
Yeah.
But you told me that there was something in there that after a long time the family realised.
Yeah. So basically, it's taken us a lot of time, to look through the book and really understand a lot of parts of it. But we realised that in the certificates here, that she'd actually given the boy a name, and his name's Nick Cullis, and that was just really nice.
It's only when you saw it in the high-res images?
Yeah, the high-res, because I didn't quite realise in the originals, and perhaps maybe my emotional state at the time, I wasn't particularly focusing on that, but it was only when I was examining the high-resolution images that we saw that, and it was just really cool to see it, especially because we were trying to work out some different names for the book, because the book didn't actually have a name yet. It had a working title. So one of the names that we had actually come up with for the book included a boy's name and a girl's name. So it was a really good thing that we didn't use that name, because it would have totally
Yeah.
not made any sense.
They haven't even looked at these pictures.
Yeah, exactly. So,
And why did you decide to call it Small Things?
Well, I guess, small things can be interpreted in a lot of different ways, but I kind of look at it as, small things can add up, whether it's small negative things, like little small things that happen in your day that can build up and cause you to have self-doubt and sadness, or if it's little small things that, like reaching out to someone and saying hi and being nice to people that can make a difference. So you can look at it two different ways. But that's just the way I look at it. I think there's a few different interpretations.
James, in conclusion, I'd really like to ask you what impact small things, even just one single thing that you would take away from this book.
It's a really hard question. I think I'm just so astonished at the level of technique and skill in the artwork. It's absolutely incredible. Just that page that Violet was just holding up, it's very hard to tell whether it's pencil sketches or whether it's 3D computer generated imagery. They're just so flawless, these characters. And I really wish I got to meet Mel, really. I really wish I got to meet her, because she was an astonishing artist and she could have done so many amazing things, but I'm just really glad that this piece of work is here, because so many people are going to be affected beautifully by this book.
I guess regardless of the story, about our family story or any of it, it's just a beautiful piece. It's just a beautiful book. And I love that we can just focus on that as well, just how skillful she was and how creative she was, and what a unique person she was.
Yeah, and you've really faithfully and flawlessly carried out Mel's wishes with this book. It's been such a privilege to be able to talk to you about it today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here.
And James, thank you so much for sharing your insight. It's been really valuable to have you as part of this conversation.
No problems. Thanks for having me.
If any of today's themes have raised issues for you, you can access support 24 hours a day by calling Lifeline on 13 11 14. Every month we create book club notes for our featured book. You can subscribe to our book club's newsletter to receive them direct to your inbox, or you can download them from the For Readers section of our website. If you don't have a local bookshop where you can buy the books we feature, then you can buy them from Crow Books in Perth. By special arrangement with Writing WA, mention the code Cover to Cover when you place your order by phone and you'll get the postage free. We love receiving your feedback about Cover to Cover. If you'd like to get in touch with us, please use the email. Thanks for joining me again this month. So far on Cover to Cover, we've discussed literary fiction, short stories, crime novels, romance, children's books, young adult novels, biography and non-fiction. If your book club is interested in a particular genre, then please get in touch to send us that feedback. Thanks once again to Violet and James. Enjoy reading local, and I look forward to your company next month on Cover to Cover.